Well, hello everybody. It says live, and man, I'll tell you what. No matter what your day is like, you just put on some Steely Dan, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is going to be okay, brother and sisters. Yeah. So, how y'all doing? Good to see ya. Glad you stop in, and favor be unto us all. Nothing missing, nothing broken. Hey, Cass, how you doing, girl? And David Barry and Bosto to everybody. Yeah, be of service, be in service, be good. Be service to somebody. And happy birthday. Got a lot to do in this book. I was up really late. I've been really busy today. You know, there are certain things that I enjoy doing, and there are some things I don't so much enjoy doing. And sometimes you got to do the things that you don't enjoy. Makes, I guess, when you get to do the things you want to do that you do enjoy, makes you to enjoy it better, right? And that's what we're going to be finding out a lot about our nature, man, woman. We're going to continue in the bronze books, the Colburn Bible, and because I was for many years very much into Nibiru. I mean, I did the research. I know that, there is validation for the event. If it's a cyclical one, I'm not sure. But what I do know is this: Earth, our solar system, is not in a stable region. It may appear that way, but quite honestly, space is a very, very violent place. Um, it gives life. We're here. Earth is here. But it also takes it away. And there are signs, things happening. One of the things that I know of, and this is scientifically correct, is we've watched our quadrant of space heat up. Now it's here in our solar system, whatever it is, whatever background radiation, radio frequency, whatever it is, the planets are warming. We know and been expecting certain things, and it appears by Pluto, we still don't know why. You lose a fifth of your atmosphere in a matter of a couple of years, it's going to bring changes. Here where I live in Colorado, we have been experiencing some very interesting phenomena. One of them being the increased frequency of what they call microburst. Where my wife was yesterday, they were caught in a microburst. These are winds that are up to 80 miles an hour. And it's like basically there's this huge vortex that's opened up in the atmosphere, and the air comes rushing down. Now, on the plains, which are just east of us here in Colorado, they have been experiencing a very odd weather phenomenon. These microbursts are happening in the middle of the night. And the thing about it, what makes it even more odd, is that we're seeing huge temperature increases, typically about 20, 25 degrees. One happened just 2 nights ago out on the plains, and the town where it hit went from, I think it was 61 degrees up to 89 at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And we're seeing more of that. Another thing that we are noticing here is it's not cooling off at night. I mean, it's hot during the day. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We're in a drought. And if it hadn't been for the group experiment, we would have had no rain at all. And I just want to say hello. Thank you, all the moderators, all of y'all. Ethereal Waves, hello. I like that. That's pretty cool. So, nighttime cooling is not happening. It's staying warm at night. So are these indicative of things? Yeah. I mean, we're witnessing the poles, the magnetic poles are shifting. North is now in Siberia. Siberia is experiencing some of the most bloodiest hot weather, fires. They're calling them eternal fires because the fires that started last year didn't go out over the winter. And as the North Pole continues to trek, we're going to see these anomalies. NASA just announced 2 days ago that the North Atlantic anomaly, it's splitting in two. Now, what that means, I don't know. Some seem to think that it means that it's going to, eventually the poles are going to be where we see the Indian Ocean and the North Atlantic, I mean the Mid-Atlantic. So anyway, a lot of things going on. Now, this book is so timely with everything else we're into, we're reading, because it tells a story that can be validated from many other points of view. So to get right into it, let's get right into it, because I mean, I was up late last night rereading it. You know, when you start dog earing and dog tailing the pages, and you've got markups in it, and it that tells you, it's, for me, it's a hell of a book. You know, there's so many epiphanies, you know, they're just like the 4th of July. Pow, pow, pow. So anyway, I say that the dragon is about to come back. And what I mean by the dragon is this. We're going to read, we read some of it yesterday on Trina's and my show, The Second Look. We're going to kind of do that and then begin to move forward, because the story gets even, you're going to love it. That's all I got to say. You're going to love it. We know at least one comet passed by. It may have been two. Not sure. And now I don't know if it's sapiens that survived it. May have been. We know we gave ourselves amnesia. Whatever we encountered the first time was so horrible, so frightening. Again, people lost their bowels. We're going to read on the second account. The children's hair turned white. Whatever it is. So let's get right into this. Now, there are two documents that we're going to kind of go. We're going to get back into here, destruction, recreation, because this kind of really brings out what you see in the Epic of Gilgamesh, what you see in the first 2 chapters of the book of Genesis. These stories have a commonality. This one here does not leave any ambiguity in the story. The only ambiguous part that I see is, well, this must be sapiens. I don't know. Could have been Neanderthalis. I don't know. Maybe Cro-Magnus. Now, there's another book here. Chan Thomas's book, The Adam and Eve Story. Now, this is here about Cataclysm, and the one that is going to be coming for us. And the interesting thing, as we get into the next cataclysm, I want you to keep in mind that these are potential crossings. And that's what Nibiru means, crossing. You have so much contamination of religion in so much of what we see today when we try to pull it apart from it. But unfortunately, so much of it has penetrated the facts. But what we do know, cataclysms come to Earth very, very regularly. We've been in the midst of a calm, and that's what has many people very, very nervous. And so let's read Chan's book. And this is describing the Cataclysm, the next one. This is actually a pole flip. With a rumble so low as to be inaudible, growing, throbbing, then fuming into a thundering roar, the earthquake starts. Only it's not like any earthquake in recorded history. In California, the mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. The mighty Pacific rears back and piles up into a mountain of water more than 2 miles high, then starts its race eastward. That's 11,000 feet almost. With the force of 1,000 armies, the wind attacks, ripping, shredding everything in its supersonic bombardment. The unbelievable mountain of Pacific sea water follows the wind eastward, bearing Los Angeles, San Francisco, as if they were but grains of sand. Nothing but nothing stops the relentless, overwhelming onslaught of wind and ocean. Across the continent, the 1,000-mile-per-hour wind reeks in its unholy vengeance. Everywhere, merciless, unceasingly, every living thing is ripped into shreds while being blown across the countryside, and the earthquake leaves no place untouched. In many places, the Earth's molten sublayer breaks through and spreads a sea of white-hot liquid fire to add to the Holocaust. Within 3 hours, the fantastic wall of water moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water, coast to coast. In a fraction of a day, all vestiges of civilization are gone, and the great cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York, are nothing but legends. Barely a stone is left where millions walked just a few hours before. A few lucky ones who managed to find shelter from the screaming wind on the lee side of Pikes Peak watched the sea of molten fire break through the quaking valleys below. The raging waters follow, piling higher and higher, steaming over the molten earth fire and rising almost to their feet. Only great mountains such as this can withstand the cataclysmic onslaught. North America is not alone in her death throes. Central America suffers the same fate: wind, earth, fire, inundation. South America finds the Andes not high enough to stop the cataclysmic violence pounded out by nature in her berserk rage. In less than a day, Ecuador, Peru, and Western Brazil are shaken madly by the devastating quake, burned by molten earth fire, buried under cubic miles of torrential Pacific seas, and then turned into a frozen hell. Everything freezes: man, beast, plant, and mud, and all rock hard in less than 4 hours. Europe cannot escape the onslaught. The raging Atlantic piles higher and higher upon itself, following the screeching wind eastward. The Alps, the Pyrenees, the Urals, the Scandinavian mountains are shaken and heaved even higher before the wall of water strikes. West Africa and the sands of the Sahara vanish in nature's wrath. Under savage attack by wind and ocean, the areas bounded by the Congo, South Africa, and Kenya suffers only severe earthquakes and winds. No inundation. Survivors there marvel at the sun standing still in the sky for nearly a half a day. Eastern Siberia and the Orient suffer a strange fate indeed, as though a giant subterranean scathe sweeps away the earth's foundation, accompanied by the wind in its streaming sympathy of supersonic death and destruction. As the Arctic basin leaves its polar home, eastern Siberia, Manchuria, China, and Burma are subject to the same annihilation as South America. Wind, earth fire, inundation, and freezing. Jungles, animals are shredded to ribbons by the wind, piled into mountains of flesh and bone, and buried under avalanches of seawater and mud. Then comes the terrible, paralyzing cold. Not man, nor beast, nor plant, nor earth are left unfrozen in the entire Eastern Asian continent, most of which remain below sea level. East of the Urals and in West Siberia, a few lucky people survive the fantastic winds and quakes. Antarctica and Greenland, with their ice caps, now rotate around the Earth on the torrid zone, and the fury of the wind and inundation marches on for 6 days and nights. During the 6th day, the oceans start to settle in their new homes, running off the high grounds. On the 7th day, the horrendous rampage is over. The Arctic ice age is ended. The new Stone Age begins. The oceans, the great homogenizers, have laid down another deep layer of mud over the existing strata in the Great Plains as exposed in the Great Canyons, the Painted Desert, and Badlands. Now, I want to stop right there because when we come over now, that's what's coming. The CIA has known about it. Our governments know it's coming. They may not know the exact like that, but they know cataclysm is on the horizon. It's what Earth does. So we go back here to the bronze books. Now, again, these predate the Bible, and you can see how so many of the religions today, the beliefs, dipped, how shall we say, their cup into the knowledge basin here. So we found out already that man can, in fact, induce a species collective consciousness amnesia, completely wipe it out. We will never know. That's kind of some of the conclusions that you come to, is that I don't think we're ever going to know. All right, so chapter 3, as we read yesterday, it is known that the story comes down from ancient times that there was not one creation but two, a creation and a recreation. Now, this one was about a comet. At the time of the great destruction of Earth, God caused a dragon from out of heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon is a metaphor for a comet. Then we can just take the word dragon and take it out, and we can say that the comet was frightful to behold. That it was. It lashed its tail. Well, all comets have tails. We know that. Don't think it'd be a place we want to be behind it. It breathed out fire, hot coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the comet was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath, on the belly, was a ruddy hue glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke. If it's in our atmosphere, folks, yeah, there's going to be a lot of alchemy taking place. It spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick, darkened sky, all heaven and earth being made hot. The seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. Are you seeing the similarities? I mean, it's almost like Chan got his story here, but Chan did not. Again, it was an awful, shrilling trumpeting, which overpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds. Commonality, folks, right and left. We're seeing the synergy of two documents, one modern man, one very ancient man. Men stricken with terror went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. Now we know that this event did in fact happen in Turkey. The diggings, the Göbekli Tepe. It's the same thing. They put it in stone. They knew that this comet was coming. Now, are we getting close to potential some dates? Don't know. But I find it very interesting, the correlation between what we found in Göbekli Tepe, which, by the way, folks, that's recent history, and what we're reading here in very ancient history. They were loosed from their senses and dashed about, crazed. How many movies have we seen with the nuclear explosion? I think there was the thing on the Miracle Mile that was about a scenario where the nukes came in. What did people do? They went nuts. Most were having sex, believe it or not, according to the movie. But anyway, the breath was sucked out of their body. So that tells me that there is some huge upheavals going on in the atmosphere. When you begin to have barometric pressures begin to wildly deviate, to pull the breath out of your body, it's like having the breath knocked out of you. Any of us, if you experience it, you know what I'm talking about. Pretty weird. Anyway, then it passed, leaving Earth enwrapped within a dark and glowing mantle. And that's because the inner core was coming to the top. We just got our ass kicked, which was ruddily lit up on the inside. The bowels of the earth were torn apart in great withering upheavals, and a howling whirlwind rent the mountains apart. Folks, I mean, these are two almost exact stories, but they're telling about two different events. The wrath of the sky monster was loosed in the heavens. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured down fiery destruction amid a welter of thick black blood. So awesome was the fearful aspect thing that the memory mercifully departed from man. His thoughts were smothered under a cloud of forgetfulness. It goes on to say, as we read yesterday, the earth vomited forth great gusts of foul breath from awful mouths opening up. These are volcanoes. These are chasms opening up. The evil breath bit at the throat before it drove men mad and killed them. Those are poisonous gases. Those who did not die, and in fact, we know that this happens in many areas that have a lot of volcanic activity. The real problem is in when you walk into an area that is poison gas. It'll drop you. Those who did not die in this manner were smothered under a cloud of red dust. That gives us an idea of what is the result of this passing. I say it's a comet. Some people could say it's a planet. I don't know. Or were swallowed by the yawning mouths of earth or crushed beneath crashing rocks. So these were falling out of the sky. You know, and when you look at how the plagiarizer in Revelations took the story, well, these are the giant hailstones falling out of the sky. Now, is that a planet? Is that a meteorite? Is that an asteroid? Is that a comet? Someone's going to find out. The sky monster was joined by another, and this is very interesting, which swallowed the tail of the one going before. So you have to put this in modern astronomy terms. What is a human being here describing? It was something big, and it kicked our butts a second time. The earth also, the sun stood still in this scenario, but we'll get to that. But the two could not be seen at once. That's how big they were. The sky monsters reigned and raged above the earth, doing battle to possess it. But the many-bladed sword of God cut them into pieces, and their falling bodies enlarged the land and the sea. Another scenario is that this was a moon. This could have been Tiamat. This could have been a number of different things, but it does have the sounding like there is another body out there, a moon, maybe another dwarf planet, I don't know, but it got broken apart. In this manner, the first earth was destroyed by calamity, descending from out of the skies. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth monsters more fearsome than any that had ever haunted the uneasy dreams of man. Men in their dwelling places were gone. Only sky boulders and red earth remained. So the planet got pummeled. I mean, when you've got, and I'm sure by the description of this, they probably house-sized boulders. But amidst all the desolation, a few survived. For man is not easily destroyed. They crept out of the caves and came down from the mountainsides. Hey, folks, come on. Their eyes were wild and their limbs trembled, their bodies shook, and their tongues lacked control. Their faces were twisted and the skin hung loose on their bones. They were as maddened wild animals, driven beasts into the enclosure before the flames. They knew no law, being deprived of all the wisdom they once had, and those who had guided them were gone. You know, listen, that's happened to us in modern times. The burning by the Christians of the Library at Constantinople, the Muslims in their ravages across the earth, the burning of Alexandria, and then, of course, the burning of Rome. Great depositories of knowledge and wisdom deprived us. We live through this all the time. I don't think we're going to get much farther ahead in our technology. The earth, the only true altar of God, had offered up a sacrifice of life and sorrow to atone for the sins of mankind. These are not the sins of what you think in the Bible. Man had not sinned indeed, but the things that he failed to do. Man suffers not only for what he does, but for what he fails to do, cause and effect. The 7 laws, the 7 principles. He is not chastened for making mistakes, but for failing to recognize and rectifying them. Now, the great canopy of dust and cloud. This is evident of a planet, a comet, something was so close, something exploded so close that it put us into an ice age. Enshrouding in a heavy darkness was pierced by a ruddy light, and the canopy swept down in great cloudbursts and raging storm waters. We don't know if this is how long a period this is. All we know is that according to the scribes here, this is how it went in order. Cool moon tears were shed for the distress of earth and woes of man. When the light of the sun pierced the earth's shroud, bathing the land in revitalizing glory, the earth again knew night and day. For there were now times of light and times of darkness. The smothering canopy rolled away, and the vaults of heaven became visible to man. The foul air was purified, the new air clothed the reborn earth, shielding her from the dark, hostile void of heaven. Folks, we're not that good at spotting things, by the way. We only get a small portion. The rainstorms ceased to beat upon the face of the land, and the waters stilled their turmoil. Earthquakes no longer tore the earth open, nor was it burned and buried by hot rocks. Something exploded. The land masses were reestablished in stability, and they were solid, standing firm in the midst of the surrounding waters. The oceans fell back to their assigned places, and the land stood steady upon its foundations. The sun rose upon the land and sea, and life was renewed upon the face of the earth. Rain fell gently once more, and the clouds of fleece floated across the day skies. The waters were purified, the sediment sank, and life increased in abundance. Life was renewed, but it was different. Man survived, but he was not the same. The sun was not as it had been. That's key. Remember that. Whatever passed us by, if it was Nibiru, whatever, Nemesis, it changed our sun. I don't know exactly what that means, but anyway, and the moon had been taken away. Huh. And a moon, not the moon, a moon. We have no records of a time when Earth had more than just this artificial satellite we have here. Someone moved this one here, but I guess because, you know, if the moon serves a purpose, there's a balance how it keeps the Earth in rotation, etc. Interesting, isn't it? Man stood in the midst of renewal and regeneration. Doesn't this sound like Genesis 2? He looked up into the heavens above in fear for the awful powers of destruction lurking there. I mean, figured like this, folks. It came one time. Odds are pretty darn good they're going to come again. Henceforth, the placid skies would hold a terrifying secret. We lost that secret. We lost our fear of the heavens. Man found the new earth firm and the heavens fixed. He rejoiced, but also feared, for he lived in dread that the heavens would again bring forth monsters and crash about him. When men came forth from their hiding places and refuge, the world their fathers had known was gone, gone, gone. The face of the land was changed. I mean, are we talking about potentially the splitting of Pangea? Don't know. The earth was littered with rocks and stones, which had fallen when the structure of heaven collapsed. One generation groped in the desolation and gloom, and as the thick darkness was dispelled, its children believed they were witnessing a new creation. Why wouldn't they write it? If you ever, you think about it, if Moses wrote this, which he did not, he was channeling, folks. They hate it when I say that, but it was true. All right. Time passed, memory dimmed, same way we do today, and the records of event were no longer clear. Generation followed generation as the ages unfolded. New tongues and new tales replaced the old. Chapter 4, Affliction of God. This comes from the scroll of Korobel, the Pachytherum, who wrote, "The forebears of all the nations of men were once one people, and they were the elect of God, who delivered all the earth over to them. All the people, the beasts of the field, the creatures of the wastelands, and the things that grew." This is a clue, folks. This is also a contract. Now, I don't know if these are earthmen, but you figured, draw your own conclusion. They dwelled through long ages in lands of peace and plenty. There were some who struggled harder, were more disciplined, because their forefathers had crossed the great dark void. I think that was an ocean. I don't know. That's my interpretation. Their desires were turned Godward, and they were called the children of God. Back in my day at rock concerts, the children of God gave out free sandwiches. And anyway, their country was undulating and forested. It was fertile, having many rivers and marshes. There were great mountains to the east and to the west, and in the north was a vast stony plain. Then came the day when all things became still and apprehensive. For God caused a sign to appear in the heavens. so that men should know the earth would be afflicted, and the sign was a strange star. The star grew and waxed to a great brightness, and was awesome to behold. It was put forth horns and sang. Now that's weird. Some say that that's what Nibiru looks like. Who knows? Being unlike any other ever seen. So men, seeing it, said among themselves, surely this is God appearing in the heavens above us. The star was not God, though it was directed by his design. But the people had not the wisdom to understand. Then God manifested himself in the heavens. His voice was as the roll of thunders, and he was clothed with smoke and fire. You know what that sounds like to me? Like a UFO, but hey, what do I know? He carried lightning in his hands, and his breath falling upon the earth brought forth brimstone and embers. That sounds to me like a light weapon. Most likely some advanced photon weapon of some kind. His eyes were a black void. Well, that's a hell of a picture for a god. And his mouth an abyss containing the winds of destruction. It's like the masters of the Far East said, why do you Westerners worship these angry gods? Anyway, he encircled the whole of the heavens, bearing up his back a black robe adorned with stars. Well, now we know that this is not a person. Something more going on here. Such was the likeness and manifestation of God in those days. Awesome was his countenance. Terrible was his voice of wrath. And the sun and the moon hid themselves in fear, and there was a heavy darkness over the face of the earth. This is another encounter. I mean, the only thing I'm keep on thinking, we're just in a very unusual time of what we call a placid quadrant of space. Because the earth back in this time, and I don't know when it was, holy cow, I mean, it was definitely the wild frontier. God passed through the spaces of the heavens above with a mighty roar and a loud trumpeting. Well, now that sounds to me like another celestial object. Then came the grim, dead silence, the black, red lit twilight of doom. Great fires and smoke rose up from the ground, and men grasped for air. The land was rent asunder and swept clean by a mighty deluge of waters. A hole opened in the middle of the land, the waters entered, and it sank beneath the seas. Ladies and gentlemen, this is also giving us heads up. There is an ocean underneath our oceans. There's another ocean inside the inner earth. Mountains of the east and west were split apart and stood up in the midst of the waters, which raged about. The northland tilted and turned over on its side. This sounds to me like a pole flip. Then again, the tumult and clamor ceased, and all was silent. In the quiet stillness, madness broke out among men. Again, ladies and gentlemen, repeated chapter after chapter. When we see these events, it drives us mad. And you can't tell me that just because we think we're all smarty pants, I got my smartphone and, I got my computer. No. That's what all I got to say is no. Frenzy and shouting filled the air. They fell upon one another in senseless, wanton bloodshed. Isn't that what's going on in Portland and others? Yeah. Neither did they spare woman or child, for they knew not what they did. Holy crapola. This is a mass madness that has happened to sapiens, apparently, very, very frequently. They ran unseen, dashing themselves to destruction. Folks, this is exactly where the plagiarist in Revelation got his story. I can give it to you chapter and verse if you want. They fled to caves and were buried, and taking refuge in trees, they were hung. There was rape, murder, and violence of every kind. The deluge of waters swept back, and the land was purged clean. Earth will only put up with man's bullshit so long, and she's had enough of it. Rain beat down unceasingly, and there was great winds. The surging waters overwhelmed the land, and man, his flocks, and his gardens, and all his works ceased to exist. This is a flood. Some of the people were saved upon the mountainsides and upon the flotism. That's the debris. But they were scattered far apart over the face of the earth. No Noah's Ark here, folks. They fought for survival in the lands of uncouth people. Amid coldness, they survived in caves and sheltered places. The land of the little people and the land of the giants, the land of the necklace ones and the land of marshes and mist, the lands of the east and west were all inundated. The mountain land and the lands of the south, where there is gold and great beast, were not covered by the waters. Men were distracted and in despair. They rejected the unseen God behind all things for something which they had seen and known by its manifestation. Manifestation? They were less than children in those days and could not know that God had afflicted the earth in understanding and not willfully, for the sake of man and the correction of his ways. You know, here's my commentary. God ain't powerful enough. That ain't the purpose of a God, in my opinion. If it is, then these are killing son of a bitches. I don't want anything. I don't tell me how ignorant I may be. Murder is murder. That's an asinine way of looking in a context that, well, God knows what he's doing. The hell he does. Again, don't send me this pile of manure and tell me I'm supposed to buy it because I'm just a mortal man and I cannot understand the mind of God. Well, I can't understand murder is murder. So, I'm not required to meet him at his place. He's required to come meet me at mine. Oh, I continue. The earth is not for the pleasure of man, but is a place of instruction for his soul. A man more readily feels the stirrings of his spirit in the face of disaster than in the lap of luxury. The tuition of the soul is a long and arduous course of instruction and training. Now, is this giving us a clue then to something else is taking place here? Because here is the first introduction of the soul. And it leads us to at least to begin to deduce that there's something else going on here than physical life. And that man is not designed to live in luxury. Man is designed to live in hardship. Because only through hardship do we learn. Only through violence can we advance and ascend. God is good, and from good, evil cannot come. He is perfect, and perfection cannot produce imperfection. Only the limited understanding of man sees imperfection in that, which is perfect for its purpose. Wow. So, yeah, we've talked about this. So this perfect God, impossible for him to have evil, impossible for him. Again, we're in this whole him thing, but we'll just, let that slide. So imperfection could never come from it. So if like produces after like, and if perfection is perfection, then where did imperfection arise? This grievous affliction of man was another of his great tests. He failed, really, and in so doing followed the paths of unnatural gods of his making. Man makes gods by naming them, but where in this is the benefit to him? And by the way, if you name it, it ain't no God. If you can name it, that's why even the word God invalidates the existence of God. I've said to you this before. There is something that we can't even fathom. It doesn't have a name. It literally doesn't. Evil comes into the midst of mankind, spawned by the fears and ignorance of men. An evil man becomes an evil spirit. And whatever evil there is on earth comes either from the evil of spirits or the evil of men. This blows all of the theologies, all of the scaries. What it's saying, they're us. All the boogeymans, all the demons, you're Satan, you're devil, you're Jehovah, all of them. Baal, Moloch, all of them. Or us. We invented them. Says it right there. I've known that for quite some time. There is no Jehovah, Rapha. There is no Elohim, Yahweh. If they're named, they ain't a God. Because if you know the name, you control the game. It means they can be controlled. Think about that. Evil comes from men, humans. No other place. Again, no Satan, no boogeyman. But there are things out there that far exceed any boogeyman or demons that man has ever come up with. Trust me. Chapter 5, in the beginning. Now the children of God were molded by the hand of God, which is called Awen, and it manifested according to their desires. Look at that. Their desires. For all things that have life are molded by Awen, Adam. The fox, shivering in the cold lands, longs for warmth, and so its cubs have coats. The owl, clumsy in the dark, longs to see its prey more clearly. And in generations of longing, the desire is granted. Awen makes everything what it is, for all things change under its law. Men, too, are molded by their desires. But unlike the beast and the birds, their yearnings are circumscribed by the laws of fate and destiny and the law of sowing and reaping. These, the desires, modified by the laws, are called you ready for this? Indit vadu. Unlike the beast and birds, this in man is something relating to him rather than to his offspring, though they are not untouched by it. Destiny may be likened to a man who must travel to a distant city. Whether or not he wishes to make the journey, the destination being his destiny, He may choose whether to go by way of a river or by way of a plain, whether across mountains or through forest, on foot or horseback, slow or fast. And whatever befalls him, of his decision is fate. If a tree falls on him because he chose the forest path, it was fated. For luck is an element of fate. Destiny leaves no choice. Fate gives limited choice, which may be good or bad, but it cannot be averted. What is fated must be, for at no point can there be any turning back. The circumstances that Enan Vadu of the traveler conforms to the law of sowing and reaping. He may travel in comfort or pain, happily or sorrowfully, with strength or weakness, heavily burdened or lightly burdened, well prepared or ill prepared. When the destination is set according to the degrees of a former life, then the circumstances of the journey should conform with the desire. For what use is it desiring a great destination when the law of sowing and reaping decrees that an intolerable burden must be carried on the way? Far better to have a lesser aspirations. The decree of fate are many, the degrees of destiny are few. When the earth was young and the races of man still as children, they were fertile, green pastures in the lands where all is now sand and barren wasteland. In the midst of what is a garden land, which lay against the edge of the earth eastward towards the sun rising, and it was called Murok, meaning the place of the garden on the plain. Sounds like the Garden of Eden, doesn't it? Exactly. It lay at the foot of the mountain, which was a cliff at its rising, and out of it flowed the river of Tardana, which watered the plain. From the mountain, on the other side, ran the river Kal, which watered the plain through the land of the Khaldun. The river Nara flowed westward and turned back to flow around the garden land. It was a fertile place, for out of the ground grew every kind of tree that was good for food, and every tree that was pleasant to be the sight. Every herb that could be eaten and every herb that flowed was there. The tree of life, which is also called glashar, having leaves of gold and copper. I have seen this before. I keep seeing it in my spirit eye. Was within the sacred enclosure. There, too, was the great tree of wisdom, bearing the fruits of knowledge, granting the choice and ability to know the true from the false. It is the same tree which can be read as men read a book. There also was the tree of trespass, beneath which grew the lotus of rapture. And in the center was the place of power, where God made his presence known. Time passed, and the children of God were grown strong and upright under the tempering hammer of God and earth. The anvil of God became more kindly. All was pleasant and food was plentiful. But life palls in such places, for it is against the nature of man to flourish in these circumstances. Earth is not for pleasurable dallying. It is a place of teaching, trial, and testing. Whoa. Does this hold true for today? This changes the dialogue in self-examination of why we're here. Interesting point of view, is it not? The children of God were not yet their heirs of God, nor inheritors of godhood. But there was one among them who had almost completed the pilgrimage of the individual. Wow. We ought to pay attention to this guy. He had unraveled the tangled skeins of fate and transversed the tumultuous sea of life to the many ports of destiny. And having paid the debts of sowing and reaping, it was one triumph over the individual. Is this karma, the sowing and reaping? He was Fanvar, son of Amu and Atim. He was wise and knew all things. He beheld mysteries and the secret things hidden from the eyes of other men. He saw sunrise and the sun setting in their splendor, but longed for things not realizable in the place where he lived. So because he walked with God, he was called out from his kind and brought to Murah, the garden place. Exact same story in Genesis 2. He came to it across the mountains and wastelands. Now, you have to understand, was he physically transported? Apparently. The question is, transported by what? A ship? A beam? Don't know. He came to it across the mountains and wastelands, arriving after many days' journeying. Well, then this says that he wasn't ever placed by any deity. He walked there, weary and close to death. Because of the privations that he suffered, he could just reach the refreshing waters, from which he drank deeply and filled with exhaustion. He slept. In his sleep, he dreamed, and this was the manner of his dreaming. He saw before him a being of indescribable glory and majesty, who said, I am the God above all, even above the God of your people. Interesting. I am that which fulfills the aspirations of men. I am that in which they are fulfilled. You, having traversed all the circles of the individu and established your worthiness, are now made my governor of earth, on earth, and you shall rule all things here, guiding them in my ways, leading them ever upwards into glory. This will be your labor, and behold, here is your reward. A cloud mist seemed to gather about the glorious being, enfolding him so he was no longer visible. Then the mist gradually cleared, and the man saw another form emerging. It was that of a woman, but one such as Fanfare had never seen before, beautiful beyond his conception of beauty, with such perfection of form and grace that he was dumbfounded. Yet the vision was not substantial. She was a wraith, an ethereal being. I'm going to go on a little bit, folks. We'll finish this chapter out. Now, I want to stop right here because this is one of the things that I say sounds like Lilith telling her story. The interweavingness of years of these daily programs, we're seeing it. The man awoke and sought food from the fruits about him, and having refreshed himself, wandered about the garden. Wherever he went, he saw the wraith, but was unafraid because she smiled encouragingly, bringing comfort to his heart. He built himself a shelter and grew strong again, but always, wherever he went, the wraith was not far distant. One day, near the edge of the garden, he fell asleep in the heat of the day and awoke to find himself surrounded by the sons of Bothus, not true men, but yoselings, kinfolks to the beast of the forest. Before they could take his strength and wisdom, he loosed himself among them, slaying some in his rage and might before the rest ran away. When he was done, he sat himself down beneath a giant tree, for he was wounded, and the blood gushed out from his side and gathered thickly beside him. He became faint, falling into a deep sleep. And while he slept, a wondrous thing happened. The wraith came and lay beside him, taking blood from his wound upon herself, so it congealed about her. Thus the spirit being became clothed with flesh, born of congealing blood, and being sundered from his side, she rose a mortal woman. Hell of a different of a story than in Genesis 2, would we not say? Woo, yeah, but almost the exact concept, is it not? Just this one here, the different point of view. In his heart, Fanvar was not at rest because of her likeness, but she was gentle, ministering to him with solitude, and being skillful in the ways of healing, she made him whole. Therefore, when he had grown strong again, he made her queen of the garden land. And she was so called even by our fathers, who named her Gullah. But Fanfar called her Ara, meaning helpmate. In our tongue, she is called the Lady of Lanvid. Now God enlightened Fanfare concerning the woman, saying, this woman was drawn from her compatible abode in the realm of beauty. The compatible abode in the realm of beauty. Wow. Through the yearning aspirations of men, her coming accomplishes something which would otherwise have taken countless generations. For earth is more fitting for man to learn manly things than for women to learn womanly things. This woman is not as other women, being in no way like yourself. Every hair of her head is unlike that of a man. Every drop of blood and every particle of flesh is that of a woman and quite unlike that of a man. Her thoughts and desires are different. She is neither coarse nor uncouth, being altogether of another, more refined realm. Her daughters will walk proudly, endowed with every womanly perfection and grace. Delicacy, modesty, and charm will be the lovely jewels enhancing her womanliness. Henceforth, man will be truly man, and woman will be truly woman, men being girded with the manliness and women clothed with womanliness. Yet they shall walk together, hand in hand, towards the ascending glory before them, each the helpmate and inspiration of the other. So Fanfar and Aru lived in contentment amid bounty and fruitfulness. With freedom from afflictions and sickness, they delighted in each other and became of their differences, were drawn even closer together. Aru brought but one thing with her when she crossed the misty frontier, the treasure of the Lanvid, the jewel contained in the moon chalice, the stone of inspiration fashioned by the desires of men, never owned by any but the daughters of Aru. This, the Legale, the Aru gave to Fanfar as her dowry and her pledge of purity and exclusiveness. She followed the ways of the cradle land, not the ways of earth. Wow. We got to find out what the cradle lands are. Within the garden was the sacred enclosure, the domain of Fanfar and Aru, forbidden to those of the children of God who had now come to this place. It contained the chalice of fulfillment, granting any who drank from it the realization of all things to which they aspired. Wouldn't you love a sip of that? None might drink from this save Fanfar and Auru. Also, there was the cauldron of immortality, containing an essence distilled from the fruits growing in the garden, and this guarded against mortal ills. Aru brought forth a son by Fanfar, and he was called Ratokai, and the daughter who was called Armenia. Each knew the mysteries of magic and the ways of the stars. In the fullness of time, Ratuki married among the daughters of the sons of God and had two sons. I think that is Enasari and Neduka. It was Inari who first taught the weaving of cloth from plants, and it was Enduka was a mighty hunter. Armenia was married among the sons of God and brought forth a son who was called Bellinki, and daughters called Anua and Amita. Anua knew the making of pots and things of clay, and Manita the taming of beasts and birds. Nanuka had two sons, Matara and Kiena. Nantatara had two sons also. As you can see, this begins to go, and we're not going to spend a whole lot. This is like the genealogy of what you get in the Old Testament. There are some interesting things here. When Beleniki married Indavia and had a son in Kadua and had a daughter called Estarloth, meaning maid of the morning, and she became a great teacher among the children of God. This was the Estra who became the first moon maiden, being later called Lady of the Morning Star. In Kadua had the daughter, and her name was Mavia. I think that's how it's said. Now, isn't this interesting? Because here we have, for the first time I've ever read, the female part of Lucifer. Lucifer, the morning star. Here we have the lady of the morning star. Where did she go? Well, I'm really running late, and I don't know if we'll even know that we got way too much to go yet here. All right, well, so we'll pick up on here, but I just wanted to point, that's for me, it's one of those weird things you look at and you go, the lady of the morning star. Well, wouldn't it make sense that if you're in a patriarchal mindset, that you would change the feminine to the masculine? And it has been rumored in many writings that Lucifer is female, always was female. Well, you're welcome. I mean, what they did with what's called the Bible and the Torah and the Quran and what have you, it's upside down. Because we're reading in this book, and we still got more to go, and we're going to have fun with this. I mean, there are stories that all of us can trace back to other stories, and you're going, well, now that makes sense. Why didn't they tell us that in the beginning, you know? Hey, Big Al. You're welcome. How's Perry doing, my friend? So good to see you. Brandy, Rod, David Castle, and I seen David Barry. Joyce, are you serious? Pamela Jean. Yeah, Pamela Jean says, right, Lucifer is female. The Bible describes her as beautiful. And we have now something that's not even Hebraic. Even the Egyptian says they don't know where it came from, but it was before the Hebrews. And now we have the daughter who becomes the lady of the morning star. Oh, that just excites me all over the place. You know, it's like, yeah. Hey, Nina the Mystic, how you doing, dear? So good. Deborah, Claudette, Tina Bop, all good to see you. I think maybe known as Lucifer fully integrated. I don't know. I don't know. What did we learn today? We learned a lot. One, we know it's coming back. Whatever the hell has, we're going to listen, folks. We've got 3 more visits from celestial bodies we're going to be reading about. We found out the first flood. We found out the first cataclysm, which was, Earth completely burned up, and yet we still survived. Really interesting. We're hardy, if to say the least. And now we're finding out that there was a place called the Garden Land, not the Garden of Eden, the Garden Land, distinct boundaries, but they just don't tell us. These rivers, you can't find them. I mean, the Earth has gone through a cycle or two since this was written. So, yeah. Thank you, Free Spirit. Much love to you and Favor and BOSTO and BISTO as well. All right, folks, we'll pick up tomorrow. We're going to continue on this. Friday, we have our card reading day, but we're going to continue on this because there is some clarity. And I think once we get finished with, we're not going to read the whole thing. But when we get to the relevant pieces, we're going to start going back into the books that we have already been in. By the way, I know that Robert V over on the Milky Way Soul Tribe channel, they're going to be reading I Am, I Create. So check that out for sure. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Y'all are so just the kindest group of souls around. Thank you, Deborah. That was very kind. So, all right, 11, 11, 11. Wow. All right. That's the perfect time to ease out of this, and we'll see you tomorrow. So, BOSTO, let's continue to learn, right? All right. Bye-bye, folks. Talk to you soon.